The Purlieus by Cisco. The man swayed, looking at me, but somehow incompletely. Mind if I sit? He asked. I won't say anything. I had the impulse to quit the bench and leave it to him. The day was passing, the lights would be coming on soon. I liked to sit here and watch them come on sometimes. It was a way of restoring myself a bit before the long train ride home. The man smelled like liquor, and his head drooped beneath a gray veil of heavy drunkenness I could almost see. He reminded me of someone I knew once, though, and the pang of memory kept me from getting up. Go ahead, I told him. He sat heavily, his hands between his thighs, slumped back against the seat. He threw his head back then and let it sag back, lifting his chin and shutting his eyes, which I now saw were bright with tears. I took him for a professional run up against some tragedy. He sighed and sighed again, rubbed his face, and went slack, sighing. You all right? I asked. Yeah, he said, rubbing his face again and seeming to draw his head from his shoulders with effort. I saw alarm flash in his eyes. Am I disturbing you? He asked me. I'm sorry. He said this with such a woeful expression that I couldn't help taking an interest in him. Things were so much simpler when we were kids, he said. I felt my interest start to evaporate. There wasn't all this. He waved his hand to designate all this, meaning perhaps the city, the traffic, the park, the passing of time, the crowds streaming on the distant sidewalks, the indifference of all this man-made business. Well, there was, but none of it meant anything. You didn't know what the hell it all meant, but you believed what they told you about it. I excused myself and began to get up. I remember, he said, his voice becoming wistful. I read this book when I was a boy. I wish I could remember the name. Maybe you read it too. It was set in England around Edwardian times on a country estate or something. Something in the country. And it was about a boy who met this girl. Her name was Snowy, I think. You okay? I did not return his look. I kept my eyes fixed straight ahead. Just a cramp. I get them sometimes. He said, letting his head drop. The sound of traffic replaced his voice for a while. Snowy Amworth. That was her name. Anyway, he said at last, the boy and the girl find, an enchanted spot, a magical spot in the fields. He says the word fields with a fleeting delight in his voice, and for an instant a sort of golden light seems to play over the dull greenish-black slope before me. And there's something they do there. They meet with a beast that lives there, and it's wonderful, and the little girl, she's not wanted at home, and she keeps going back to this spot because it's like there's no place else for her. The man sighs again. I can sense the sorrow welling up from deep within him, filling his voice, and throwing a shadow over him. I turn to look at him again. His face weaves back and forth before me, very faint in the lights of the buildings far away shining through the trees. And there's an offer made, and she takes it. She commits suicide, and the boy finds out too late, and he comes and he sees her go. And now fear lifts up out of him, blending itself with the sorrow. And he sees something come. The demon, and it comes to receive Snowy, and then it looks just like her, and her body doesn't look like her anymore. The way a dead body doesn't look like the person it was. The demon walks away with her. Her appearance. The man sobs. Twice. Sorry. It was so sad. My left hand flashes through the air and closes on his throat. The man stares at me, eyes wide, saying things, inchoate things like, "Hey, and what? And leave me. How did you find me?" I climb on top of him, pinning him, clutching his neck. I shake him. "Who sent you?" The man jabbers, fumbling at me. "You're talking to me? About Snowy?" I ask him through gritted teeth, giving him another shake. I'm trembling. I'm seeing white. The man bucks beneath me, finally getting the idea, beginning, too late, to struggle in my grasp. But I have him pinned. My weight is on him. "Did it send you? Did it send you? Did it?" The lights of the park come on, blacklighting the huge boulder behind the bench, blinding me with its sudden glare. I push down into him, and he buckles under me. "Where is she?" My voice is low, but it tears my throat. The man stops, struggling. I glanced back as I ran down the hill, and before I had enough sense to slow to a quick walk, a less suspicious walk, I caught a glimpse of his hand protruding from the shadow that engulfed the bench, palm up, like someone begging for money. The hand was disembodied, amputated by the hard edge of the shadow that concealed the rest of him. My own hands ached. He'd pummeled and battered me, but my grip had only tightened and tightened, tightened until his body had finally gone slack, more and more slack. Questions raced through my mind, repeating, "Who sent him? What sent him? Why now? Where is she?" I can't say how long it's been since I've slept. It must be at least 2 days. All the same, I seem to be sleeping all the time. Leaves drip water onto me. How did the water get on the leaves? Why does it fall only on me? Out of every shadow of a certain darkness, his hand is extended toward me, palm up, like someone begging. But even without such shadows, even without... There's the sound I felt in my palms and fingers. The humming tube his neck was in my hands, filled with pent-up breath I wouldn't let out. A choked gurgling is embedded in my hands, like my own pulse, perhaps forever. I dunk both my hands in a sink of cold water and hold them there for as long as I can stand it, until my bones light up with cold, but that little tickle his Adam's apple left against my palms is still there. I don't want to forget. I can't afford to, because I have to avoid being caught. The body still hasn't been found, or if it has, they're keeping the news to themselves, and why wouldn't they? I can't imagine a body lying there on park bench, unnoticed for at least 2 days. Since there's no word about the body anywhere, I have to assume the police found it first and got it out of there early in the morning, even before the sunrise, the early morning police. So there was nothing for anyone to see except maybe a sheeted figure on a stretcher. Where was the worried family? The announcement that someone had gone missing, the urgent request for information. If he were all alone in the world, why wouldn't he have done his drinking at home? Why come to the park if not to sober up for someone else's sake? Why unburden yourself to a stranger if not to conceal something from your family? But he wasn't a stranger, because what stranger would have known about Snowy? This is precisely where the story finally begins to make sense. Daunted at the last minute by the task he has been sent to perform, the man bolstered his courage, or really his effrontery, his insolence, his duplicity, with a few drinks first. He must have thought that a show of drunkenness would have made it easier for him to approach me and draw me into an ostensibly spontaneous conversation, but he overdid it, became actually drunk. The rendezvous had been fixed. Whoever sent him knew I was entering the park, on my way to the bench I'd picked out as my own, and that it might be a long time, weeks, before I came back again to this spot, which had to be in that very spot, and that only, the spot where he would sound me out. A carefully selected and isolated spot where he would sound me out, find out just what I know, or no, they knew that already. The point, as I have already determined, to take Snowy away from me. The thought of Snowy washes over me, all my love for her incessantly reviving, overwhelming me again. A scrap of lace lying bright in a shop window, the ideal perfume of blooming wisteria, the intimate cry of the morning dove, and all my love for her revives. This is what had to be prevented, but the game was dangerous. It backfired, and fully resurrected the love that I was born to give to her. I'd never forgotten her, no matter what anyone might have thought, any more than I could ever have forgotten the terror of what was done to her, that I alone saw, no matter what anyone else says. They've even written a book about it, to discredit me, and even then they couldn't help making it beautiful or showing me in my true light. I see her rushing to embrace her dying mother on her deathbed, luminous in the shadowy sick room, her face mingled anguish and beauty to stop the heart and to dominate my memory like a religious emblem. Where was I? In my mind's eye is almost as if I had been standing like a ghost submerged in the wall by the bed, but then I must have been looking in through a window. And, now that I think of it, I do recall the window frame and the white of the wall outside, crawling with moonlit columns of ants. I was a boy her age then. Perhaps I stood on a rock or a low wall. That might account for my elevated point of view. Fire blooms in my chest whenever I recall the gently abashed way she told me her name was Snowy Amworth, knowing it was a peculiar name, knowing that it was also a charming name, although she could not have known how strong that charm could be, that she was casting a lifelong spell on me. She claimed every flake of snow I would ever see, and at the same time the soft and fragrant air of summer twilight into which she always seemed about to dissolve, and with which she always seemed about to become one. Snowy, name of my life. Bisected by a shadow, a truncated arm, the open palm hangs open in front of me. You wanted me to put her name into that palm? You got what you deserved. I know exactly what's going on, and I'm not naive about the role the police are playing in it, hiding your death, and even making believe you're still alive, all because it wasn't enough, what you did to her. And that's the only thing that makes sense, that you are part of it too. You were all against Snowy and us. Everything was. Everything but nature, which you hate. The trees and the sky, which you mock. The quiet at the Purlieus. The sound of the fountain and the birds and the drowsy haze, which you sneer at. So you want her memory now? It wasn't enough? The image you took from her? You have to filch her image from my memory too, because I loved her, and so some of her life still lives in me. And you've come after me at last. You've finally worked up the nerve to come after me and try to take it from me after all these years. But who did you send? A drunk? Was that really the attempt on my memory? Or was it a trap? To provoke me to murder, and to give yourselves a pretext to make away with me, arrest me, drag me to prison, extract her memory from my mind at your leisure then? But then, why waste a man's life like that, when you could have pulled me right off that bench? Something is apparently restraining you. You're the types who can't move in straight lines. You wanted me to disclose something, didn't you? Let me drift into her memory, and that would expose her to you, your seizure. Then you could finish the job. Is that it? With me as an accomplice, and that accusation you knew would destroy me? Well, that didn't work out so well for you, did it? How are you going to catch me unawares now? What a blunder. When at last I do sleep, I see the man's eyes in the shadow. I am up above him, kneeling on him, my head in the light and his below, in a shadow that closes over his face like the surface of a lake. I hold him under. The swimming eyes are barely visible, only two crescent gleams in the nebulous pallor of the contorted face, full of unfeigned shock and fear. And now, with hatred, too, they appear below me, not quite from beneath the floor, screened by a sheet of light from the lamp that falls between us like a lid on the shadow. What are you doing here? That's what they're asking. Despite myself, my mind returns to what I saw in late September when I screamed Snowy's name so hard I felt my soul leave my body. When Snowy fell among the trees and her neck snapped. When I saw the beast slithering toward her from the shuddering curtains of leaves and the shadows beneath the blue stones, like a coruscating amalgam of every part of the day, and leaned over her, you, Snowy, and when it stood up straight, it turned its face, now your face, to see me and to try its new smile on me. Its nightmarish smile. That day I stood over you. I looked down on you. I saw your face wasn't yours anymore. The wind rose in the trees, stirring the morning doves. You didn't look like yourself, because that thing from the woods, the beast, took your likeness and still has it after all these empty years, hiding behind those empty years now, turning them into the haunted, sacred forest by the Purlieus. The smile even now tries to destroy your real image. It gnashes its teeth in my memory, a bullet hole in the portrait. It gibbers, bites, shatters the sunlit day like painted glass. But nothing can stop you from floating back up into view as you were when you hurried to your mother's bedside, framed in the window I looked through. Nothing could have prevented you from looking at the little painting hidden inside the wall, even knowing what that would mean for someone in your family. Nothing can prevent your name and image from being the banner planted in me that makes me who I am, and that I am still who I am is my triumph over the beast. You gave your life, your smile, your face, because you loved me. You sacrificed yourself for me, Snowy. There's still nothing anywhere about the murder. The body, the palpable sensation of his throat in my hands hasn't faded. I know that I killed a real man and not a sending. I can't sleep, though, and that's a problem. It's beating me down. A confession to the police might enable me to sleep, but more likely it would mean placing myself under the sway of the beast. Nothing in my daily routine is disturbed. No one is the wiser. Some say I look a little tired, a bit under the weather, and suggest I take a sick day or two, but everyone is so bound up in their own problems that they haven't got much attention to spare for me. Otherwise, my days follow on with comforting regularity. Being too tired to think is in some ways a help to me in my work. And even though that outstretched hand begging alms is always floating somewhere in my field of vision, I don't suppose anyone else can see it. No one has asked me about it. But now, down the long hallway, raked with the golden light of late September that the window louvers break apart, golden light that shouldn't be there. A figure I know vanishing just now at the end, stepping just out of sight. A grown woman, a white skirt. I hear the word whispered. Snowy. My voice screaming it, in my memory, in silence. I'm frozen in place for only a moment. My head light, and my hands and feet like ice. I rush after you, not a little girl, but a full-grown woman, as if she had never fallen. Now I can't stop panting, and in my sleepless condition I feel like I'm going to faint, and I hurry to the bathroom to splash water on my face. No towels. I rub my face with my hands and dry them beneath the blower, lean against the wall, my face dripping onto the floor, swaying. The beast is here. It's the day of the Purlieus, isn't it? Why the hell didn't I remember? Haven't I always taken special care of this day? It can't come for me directly. These things can only come at us in golden light, at sunset, in the shadow of the old beech trees and the gnarled roots of oak trees. The beast can bring these things along and make them, but it can only get me if I come to it, if I allow myself to be tricked or confused by what I see around me, instead of sticking closely to my own inner guidance. Step 1, get out of the bathroom. Step 2, get out in public where you can be seen, where there are eyewitnesses. The corridor is empty, but footsteps are coming, almost padding. Run downstairs, then. What a risk I'm taking. Or is it the police? Will I rush outside and find them there, smiling? Coming up the stairs toward me, with a sheaf of papers in her arms. Snowy. Your face, so like hers, and just a little like her face at her mother's bedside in the little tremor of alarm, the one I saw die and go away smiling, belonging to something else, the name that echoes now up the stairwell. She's lunging back with a feigned start of surprise, and the flash of a golden band on one of the fingers that darts its gleams into my eyes, making them blink, and my body twists and footing wavers on the top step. Golden light. September. My feet push me back from the brink, and away from that thing with your likeness, aged and unlike my memory. Unlike my memory. It's changed you, not just maturing. Not Snowy Amworth anymore. That is, I remember you because you don't look like you did. That's the trick. If you look the same, I couldn't remember you because I would be seeing you, not remembering you, and I have to remember you because they want that memory torn out of me like a beating heart to eat. Coming toward me up the stairs with a sheaf of papers and her face over nothingness, the beast, over the memory of a day and a fall and the faint noise of bone breaking in the spine. I ran back into the corridor. I did not take the bait. The golden light warned me. I hurried to the other side of the building and ran down the stairs two at a time, thinking it would be there and finding nothing. The open door, the street burning with the dazzling light of the sun. Was it today? Or tomorrow? Was this only a warning? Or was I too alert? Or am I counting on everything to be over? I look back at the building to see if your face is there at any of the windows. Nothing there. They're trying to panic me to see what I will do. My feet take me uncertainly toward the park. But why would I go there if not to incriminate myself? Or am I going to find his corpse lying sprawled on a bench behind a huge boulder, one hand outstretched, palm up? I'm not a murderer. I don't want anything but to breathe air like the air of that day, filled with the smells of late summer forest baked by the sun, and remember what was not what was taken. The beast wants me to believe that something like the beast, must be a part of any day like that. It might not be lying, but the risk is the risk of love, the love that engulfed me whenever I saw you, Snowy, and that made my life ring in me like a bell, and that nothing has ever been able to revive, not even dreams. Was that you, Snowy? On the stairs? Or am I meant to torment myself with that question? There was no murder, Snowy, and there was no encounter on the stairs. All this is the beast's fantasy. I am still myself, the young boy who has always loved you and always will, and we are still running together in the light and shade of the beeches and oaks by the Purlieus. Don't go back into the park. Those aren't real trees. It isn't a real park. Be normal. Do normal things. Don't let on. Don't show variation. I go back to my apartment without hurrying. The sun is just below the horizon as I turn the keys in the door. Its light remains in the sky, even though it has vanished from sight. I step inside and set my keys down on the table by the door, same as always. I don't turn the lights on. While I am usually home earlier, I do not give myself permission to deviate from my normal routine. Leave the lights off for now and search. No one must be here. If I turn the lights on, that would be the signal for it to appear, if it is here, waiting for me already. Could I outrun the beast? But that's what I've been doing all this time. I am a little afraid to turn the lights on because the apartment doesn't really seem familiar, or I can't be sure if it is familiar or if it isn't. It's more impersonal than it should be. Uncharacteristic, like a hotel room. It has none of the special flavor that makes a place home for someone. It's my apartment, though. The same number, the same place in the building. The key fits the lock. The view out the glass balcony doors is the same. The furniture. I cross the living room toward the unpartitioned kitchen counter. Dimming light pours in through the sliding glass doors, as if there were some urgency to draining the light from the sky now that the sun was below the horizon. I never go out there. The light washes through the apartment in a golden glare that seems to darken and cloud the objects I see, as if it were smoke rather than light. There is the short hallway leading back to the bedroom, and there's the bathroom door, the bookcase, and on the shelf, directly in front of my eyes just now, faded golden letters on a narrow black spine. I pull the book down. It's an old edition, dust jacket gone, frayed binding, pages smudged. I open to the first page. The Purlieus, by Thomas Waveney, Grant Richards, London, 1907. My own name is printed on the blank page opposite in a child's handwriting. The book has some scant illustrations, all black and white sketches mingled in with the writing. I let it fall open. Snowy Amworth is framed on the white page, all squirming with black writing, rushing to her mother's bedside. The book opens to it naturally, again and again. Even when I shut it and try to put it back on the shelf, it seems to spring open to that page, obstinately returning to Snowy Amworth, who looked at the secret painting hidden in the wall, and whose neck snapped when she fell from a tree one golden afternoon, and whose likeness was stolen from her body by the beast they had met together in the timeless glens behind a country house named the Purlieus. I close the book more firmly, pressing it shut with both hands, push it onto the shelf, but it slips from my fingers and drops to the floor. I don't see where it went. I get down on my knees and search for it, still in the gathering darkness and silence. I can't find it anywhere. Not under the furniture, nowhere. On my hands and knees, I look up around to see if, in some way, it slid across the floor and ended up somewhere strange. I look toward the sliding glass balcony doors. The light coming in from the corridor outside mingles with the glow of appliance clocks in the stale air. With the darkening of the sky, the glass doors are beginning to reflect the room. In that reflection, I see only the bare, anonymous furniture, the unlived in kitchen and dinette area. The reflected bookcase is empty. The closet by the front door stands open. The post inside is a pale line in the dark, and there are no clothes hangers on it, no clothing, no boxes on the shelf above, no jumble of shoes on the floor. My jacket is gone from its hook by the door. My keys are not on the table. I fix my gaze on the spot where they should be, where I know I've just set them down with the memory of the clink they made against the tabletop. I know that my image must be there, in the center of the glass doors. My image, superimposed on the balcony, on all fours, my head thrust back against my shoulders, my face staring stupidly out over my splayed hands, searching for the book. The image must be there, a haggard, frightened man on hands and knees, down to the floor to look for an old childhood copy of the Purlieus. Not a figure bent over, only to stand again when they have the likeness of the dead, but my gaze stays riveted to the spot on the table where my keys are not, because I am afraid, so afraid to know that what's reflected in that polished glass, after all, is an apartment for rent, untenanted, long empty, and where I should be, there will only be a space. The bare floor between the bookcase and the sofa.